Good morning. Today I just wanted to mention something that it came up recently, talking with some people and some newer Christians, and then an old veteran preacher, older than me, and has been preaching longer than me, and that then it just happened that so that's two instances this thought came up, and then today, listening to a sermon, I happened to hear the same thing, and so I just want to mention it real quick. I just behind me, from here to here, is on these two shelves. Much of it is Baptist history, and there's a few other books mingled in there, but a lot of Baptist history, and then some other things, some of Spurgeon's books, and then a lot of biographies and all. But all these books on Baptist history, I would not recommend you sitting down trying to search every page of material written in Christian history and church history to discover Baptist roots or whatever. Here's what I would suggest for the average person watching this. This is Mike Johnson's book, The People Called Baptists. And I want to show you this. Look at the inside of this. Look at the size of the print, the font size, and look at the page, the margins. This is now, there's no pictures in it, but it's a simple book, and it will tell you what you need. And I would, without any hesitation, say that Brother Johnson has read more on Baptist history than I have, and I've read and listened to a lot, but he's really researched the subject and taught it at the college level many years. But the point is this: there are some people. If you go back to the Old Testament, the Levites, they had a standard of expectation, things they could do and couldn't do. And if you go to the book of Leviticus, where it talks about offerings for sin and sacrifice and things, the leaders, the Levitical leaders, and then the community, the leaders of the city, the government leaders, you might want to say, they had a different standard, and they had different sacrifices in some cases, not in every case, but in some cases. And the point being this, that God has certain people that he has certain expectations for. And I think in society we have that. I think a person that's high up in a position of leadership should have a higher standard of excellence in their personal life. That's why a lot of the things you hear people fuss about going on in Washington, D.C., it's worthy of fussing over, because we should expect more from those people. They're our leaders, and they're not just the common man, and they should have a higher standard of excellence, a higher standard of propriety and morality. My wife and I, we have certain standards in our world that I would not push on anybody in our church, and probably some things I've not even mentioned in our church. But things I won't do, places I won't go, certain activities I would not be involved in. And the reason being is that I have a position of a high calling. And with that high calling comes a high standard in my mind, a high standard of requirements. In the New Testament, in Timothy and Titus, it gives the requirements for a pastor. They call it the elder, or a bishop. If a man desires the office of a bishop, then it has a list. It doesn't have that list of requirements for a church member. And then it has in Timothy, it has a list of requirements for the deacon, pastor's wife, deacon's wife, and different things that are required in different texts, mainly in Titus and Timothy. But the point being that there are expectations. Now, back to books. You don't have to. You've not been called to silence the heretics. You've not been called, unless you're a pastor or maybe an assistant pastor. Paul told Timothy that the leadership should be able to silence the gainsayers, to answer them. We, in pastoral leadership, we should be able to answer and explain and literally shut down doctrinal error. That is our job, to protect the church. Over in Acts chapter 20, I've referred to that often. There's some great doctrine in there, The purpose of the pastor, it says, is he says, I've written these things because after my departing, grievous wolves will enter in, not sparing the flock. And also of your own selves shall men rise up and try to draw disciples away after him. And the job of the pastor is to protect. And so theologically, I am to know more. I am to study more. The Bible talks about the pastor, count him worthy of double honor, and that's an economic term. And it says count those that the pastor are worthy of double honor, especially they that labor in the word and doctrine. And so there are some pastors who are laboring in the word of God and in Bible doctrine. And so there are you don't need to read everything I read. Now you can. I'm not embarrassed by anything I read. I don't have. There's a couple of sets of books I have that I have just for reference, that I would go back to establish a principle here or there. There's a set of books I've got that kind of has the basic doctrinal belief of various groups of Christians throughout history. A lot of it's just total heresy. And I try, I don't always do it, but I try in those books to put a note, this book is, this volume or this set is basically heresy. I don't want someone, if I die and they get that book and they go, oh, Bruce Goddard, this must all be good. No, sometimes we need to know what the enemy's teaching. But you don't need to know everything I know. You don't need to write everything I write. I know I read a little bit about health, very little, and I take some vitamins. Well, I don't know what the doctor knows. That's not my job. Now, it'd be good if the doctors really knew what they were doing. Sometimes we all wonder, hoping, and even the I think they all know more than me. And my knee surgery, I'm just going to do what they said. I had that when I had the first knee surgery done. They handed me a bottle of pills and said, these are pain pills. Take one every 4 hours or 6 hours. I think it was 6 hours. And so I just did. And well, it messed me up. I couldn't sleep, and my insides didn't work right, and this drugs are bad. And I thought, no wonder people who have been on drugs for a long time walk down the street, talking to cars and telephone poles. I feel bad for them. And you get on those kind of things for years. What kind of a mess you are in your mind and your body. So I went to the doctor. I said, hey, is there something else I can do? He said, oh yeah, take ibuprofen. I thought, okay. Maybe you could have said from the beginning, hey, you take one or the other of these, but I trust our medical world to an extent, and this is a guy who does these knee surgeries many times a week. He knows, and I'm going to trust him. Well, now I realize I need to ask, and so then I got talking to the physical therapist and said, I'm just going to take the ibuprofen and see if I not take any pain pills. He said, well, look, you come in to do physical therapy, you've got to be relaxed. And so you probably need at least the first couple of weeks, maybe take a pain pill before physical therapy so you can relax so we can work with that knee. If you're all tensed up, it's not going to work. Well, see, the physical therapist knows things I don't know. The doctor knows things I don't know. But so I know some Bible. And so I just want to say, don't feel, I don't want anybody in our church to feel the pressure to know everything I know. I think it wouldn't hurt everybody in our church to know everything I know. It's not like I know any secret handshakes, and there's nothing that God has revealed to me that is some deceitful, the dark web information. It's just the Bible. But maybe there's some things that you really take a lot of time to study. He has shown the old man what is good. Micah 6:8 says, do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with thy God. Micah 6:8. That's what God would like from you. To do justly, treat people right, love mercy. When people mess up, have mercy on them, and walk with God. Walk humbly with God. That's pretty good. The New Testament, Jesus summarizes what is the great commandment? Love God. And the second's likened to it. Love your neighbor as yourself. The expectations God has on you. And again, maybe some of you, God is moving into leadership, and God may expect some other things from you. And I won't go into the requirements for a pastor, but it could be that God is going to move you. I keep open that God had touched some of the young people's hearts in our church that grew up here that are smart. We have some very smart young men that have grown up. We need people to write. We need people to write children's books. We need people to write scholarly works. I think all of the scholarship we need has probably already been written. And I love old books. So you see a lot of old books in my library. But young preachers, for some reason, they like new books. All right, then let's give them a good, fundamental, solid, Bible believing author to write the same stuff that was written in the 1800s. Let's let them write it in 2025. But none of our young men want to learn and go to school and learn to write. Nowadays you can throw it into AI. You get the doctrine right and throw it into one of these artificial intelligence things, and they'll make it readable. But still, most of us as pastors are at a level. There's some people who need to know more. If you're influencing the whole country, you better be on target. You cannot afford to waver. I'm kind of a nobody out in the corner, and I've got my little corner that I'm to steward this place. And I want to, with that in mind, I have a sermon, and I don't know if it's going to be a sermon or I don't know what it's going to be, but it's how to use your pastor. It's like, how do you use this wrench, or how do you use this new mixer you got in the kitchen, or how do you use this new sprinkler system for your timer system for your sprinklers in your yard or whatever? How do you use your pastor? And there's some things that God gave you a pastor for. You don't need to be exactly like everybody else. There are different people. My wife, going through life, has asked very little counsel of anybody. She figures read her Bible every day and pray and walk with God and listen to her teachers, listen to her pastor, in this case her husband, and she feels like she's pretty much knows what to do along the way, which is fine. Other people, they have a need for advice and counsel. I think young people going off to college, I think young people marrying, it's a pretty much accepted fact that marriage counseling will dramatically decrease the chances of divorce. So marriage counseling is good. My wife and I did some of that with the assistant pastor at our church up in Reading. But let me just give you one example. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 12 and 13, we beseech you, brethren, know them which labor among you and are over you in the Lord and admonish you. And there's three things a pastor is there to do. He labors, he is over you, so he's in the leadership, and admonish you. So the pastor's job is to admonish, to teach, to correct. Now, that's not me coming to your house, chewing you out because you're not weeding your petunia patch. But it is through my preaching, where Paul told Timothy to reprove, rebuke, and exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. So your relationship to the pastor, allow the pastor, wherever you go to church, if you've got a pastor that you can love and trust, then these are things you should do. If you don't have a pastor you can love and trust, then you need a new church or a new pastor. Either way. But this is God's calling on his people. God gave Christians the church, and then God gave the church, that corporate body of believers, a pastor. That's how God designed it. And to say I don't need a pastor, well, you're not as smart as God. God says you need a pastor. And these Christians who are out of church, and they don't go to church, or they bounce church to church to church, they're missing some of what God has for them. So he says in verse 11, in verse 12, to know the pastor, to get to know him, those who labor among you, those who are over you, and those who admonish you. Then verse 13, and to esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake. So to esteem the pastor very highly in love. Now, people don't like that, and it's hard for a pastor to talk about that, because it's kind of like, hey, I want to be treated good. I am treated good. Our church is wonderful. But the scripture, this is God talking. And he said, you need to know those people that labor among you, those people who admonish you. He says, I want you to those who labor and those who are over you and those who admonish you. He said, know them. Get to know them. You might think, well, I don't think I know you very well, Pastor. Well, call me up, ask if we can meet sometime. You come by my office, I'll come by your house. We'll meet at McDonald's for a Coke or whatever. Well, we can get to know. He says, know that pastor. One way you can get to know the pastor is come to church more often. Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, I've got a Sunday school class, so it's at least 4 times a week I'm teaching publicly. And then there's these audio messages I put out 2-3 times a week. And then there's There's video messages, and there's audio messages a couple times a week, and then I send out an email message multiple times a week. So you can get to know me without sitting across let's be healthy, a bottle of alkali balanced water. But we can sit and talk. And I just recently, a newer family in church, I stopped by their home to visit a little bit, and they had lunch. And we sat and talked Bible, we talked sports, we talked kids, we talked patriotism. It was a great time. We both know each other better, having been together, and I love spending time with our church family. And you're not a bother to me if you live in Kansas and you send a note, hey, I'd like a pastoral visit. Well, then call a pastor in your town. Or offer to buy my wife and I plane tickets if you live somewhere that's cool enough to want to go visit. I'm not sure Kansas in the summertime is really where we want to go. Chiggers and mosquitoes, fireflies are pretty awesome. But then he says in verse 13, to esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake. To esteem them, to hold them up. I think we ought to be very guarded. This is me talking. You're not going to talk ill of my pastor. When both my pastors are in heaven now, but when my pastors were living, I was not going to hear slander of my pastor, especially not the stupid things you hear. It's not a theological thing. They're not going to bring up, well, his view on the Pentateuch. No, they're not going to say that. They're going to say he's mean, or he's not nice, or he's a dictator. The liberalism, you see it in the political world. They attack very vague things because they don't have any specific thing to attack. So if you, and it has happened a few times, somebody starts to get a little critical of one of the men that I called my pastor, even when I was pastoring on my own, I was going to esteem these men very highly in love for their work's sake. Both men, World War II veterans, both men, decades-long ministries, and you're not gonna slander my pastor. Even now that they're in heaven, I'm not going to hear it. I won't allow that. I'm to hold them up. I'm to protect their name. I'm to lift their name up, to esteem them very highly in love in love for their work's sake. I am to pass along that esteem. I am to my children. My children all know that I love Pastor Blue and I love Pastor Hiles. Those men influenced my life, and I've lifted them up. I'm looking right across the room here on the wall, and there's a picture of my kids and one of my grandkids with Pastor Blue. We were on Lake Shasta together. He had a pontoon boat, and he'd take us fishing. And I think I got another picture of me up there on the bookshelf. There's a picture of Brother and Mrs. Hiles. My kids all know. My wife knows. Anybody who gets around me knows I love my pastor. I'm not going to let critical things be said of them. I'm not going to let them be attacked. I'm not going to, if something online pops up that you can tell and it's going to be slanderous, I'm not going to listen to it. I'm not going to listen so I can prove it wrong, because you can't change a critic. A critic has a heart problem, not a head problem, and all we can do is communicate with the head. So I'm going to ignore it. I don't need to hear it. But I'm going to esteem them in the eyes of others. I'm going to lift them up, and I'm going to make them big. They're just men like anybody else. But you know what? God says to esteem them highly in love for their work's sake. And so there's a lot in the Bible about the pastor. In Hebrews 13:7 and 17, it says, obey them that have spoken to you the word of truth. That's obviously the pastor, whose faith follow. So you're to see the path your pastor travels and follow that path. He's down the road further. He's safe. Up in Pismo Beach area, I've been many times. I brought others up. I've been around dunes around the country here and there, and they're okay. But the Pismo dunes are unique. The sand is soft. It's like, I can't even describe it. It's so soft. And it blows in. It's so soft that the wind blows it, and it creates these beautiful dunes. From the ocean side, they're just slow like this, but from the other side, they're sheer drop-offs, and you got to be very careful. I've told people often, if they're minors, if they're young people with me, I mandate it. If they're adults, look, do what you want, but if you would like, stay in my tracks, because you'll stay back far enough to see what happens to me. When I disappear over an edge, that means you creep up to the edge and look over before you do it. Watch me, stay in my tracks. Whose faith follow? I've been there before. I've done that before. I can have us enjoy the journey without an ambulance trip to the hospital. I've been twice to the hospital over minor injuries with friends up there. But in both cases, they didn't follow my tracks. They didn't follow my instructions, and then there was nothing major. But whose faith follow? I think it's wise to follow somebody. I may have the address of the restaurant we're going to meet at, but you have been there before. I haven't. I'm going to pretty much try to follow you and keep my eye on you just in case the GPS is wrong or something. It does happen. And if I can see you out in front of me somewhere, it's more sure I'll reach my destination. So knowing the faith, knowing the path, I want to encourage you, develop the right use of your pastor. Develop that kind of relationship where you get everything you can so that you can accomplish everything you're supposed to because somebody is following you. And that's what it's all about. It may be your children. It may be your spouse. Maybe you're single and you're going to get married one day. It may be your Sunday school class. But you need someone to guide you so you can guide someone else. And you do matter. Your life matters so much. And this is not just about the worldly success, make money, get a house, or get a big name, or whatever. It's not about that. That's why people in professional sports that use drugs to get better are looked down upon, because they're having to compromise what they are in order to achieve a name. And it's not a name if it's falsely gained. So we want to be something real. And you want then to pick up those character traits so you can lead someone else and keep people on the right path.